Have you ever signed something that ended your world, only to realize God was just beginning a new one for you? 6 years ago, she sat in a lawyer's office, tears falling onto divorce papers, and a hidden pregnancy test she never showed him. That same night, her husband walked out of her life forever. But when fate brought them face to face again years later, he wasn't just meeting the woman he lost, he was meeting the two children he never knew existed. This is a story of heartbreak, redemption, and the kind of miracle only God could write, where pain becomes purpose and love is reborn in the most unexpected way. If you believe that God still works miracles every day, hit subscribe, leave a comment, and share this story with someone who needs hope tonight. Thank you for watching. May God bless you and your family always. The rain in Denver didn't just fall, it lashed against the glass like a restless ocean. The downtown lights shimmered in the puddles, breaking into distorted reflections of gold and blue. The city was alive with noise, horns, wet tires, the low hum of nightlife. But on the 12th floor of a modern apartment tower, everything was silent except for the sound of rain. Olivia Carter stood by the large window, her reflection blurred against the storm outside. She was 31, tall and slender, with chestnut brown hair tied loosely behind her neck. Her skin was pale, her dark eyes carrying the kind of tired beauty that only heartbreak could create. The soft light from the lamp touched the side of her face, tracing the curve of someone who had once laughed easily but hadn't in months. She had already packed 2 suitcases, half her life folded neatly inside, waiting for tomorrow morning when the moving truck would take her away for good. Behind her, Julian Pierce leaned against the kitchen counter. He was 34, his tall frame still sharp in the dim light. Years of leading boardrooms and chasing deadlines had sculpted him into a man who looked as if he had been carved from stone. Broad shoulders, clean jawline, a trace of stubble shadowing his chin. His dark blonde hair was damp, brushed back carelessly after stepping in from the storm. But what once made him handsome, the confidence, the composure, now made him distant. He poured a glass of whiskey but didn't drink. "You could have stayed until the rain stops," he said, his voice low, more habit than invitation. Olivia didn't answer. She was staring at the reflection of the two of them in the glass, 2 people who once dreamed the same dream, now divided by invisible walls. "It's better this way," she said finally. "We've dragged this out long enough." Julian's hand tightened around the glass. "Dragged out? I was trying to fix it, Olivia. I built all this. For us." She turned then, meeting his eyes. "You built it for yourself. You were never home. You built a kingdom and left me as decoration." The words struck like stones. He had heard versions of them before, in their last arguments. But tonight they landed differently. Not angry, just tired. For a moment, Julian wanted to shout, to justify himself, to say the late nights and missed dinners had meaning. But all he could manage was silence. The storm outside intensified, and thunder cracked through the night. The air inside the apartment thickened. Olivia turned away, meaning to leave the room, but Julian stepped closer. His voice broke the tension, softer now. "Olivia, please." When she looked back, the sharp edges between them dulled for the first time in months. They stood face to face. The man who had built walls to protect himself. The woman who had learned to survive without him. And just like that, the space between them vanished. What began as anger dissolved into something fragile and human. The last desperate echo of love. The world outside blurred, The storm became a backdrop to the quiet surrender inside. For one night, they forgot who they had become. They reached for each other not out of hope, but out of memory. By morning, the rain had stopped. Denver's skyline rose beneath a gray dawn. Olivia woke to the pale light spilling through the blinds, the cold side of the bed empty beside her. Julian was gone, already dressed, already distant. A note rested on the nightstand, written in his precise handwriting. Take care of yourself. No apology, no promise, just an ending. Olivia folded the note carefully, placed it in the drawer, and exhaled. Her heart felt hollow, as if everything inside her had been taken but the ache. By noon, she was gone, out of the apartment, out of his world. Weeks later, in a small clinic on the quieter side of Denver, Olivia sat alone with a white plastic stick trembling in her hand. 2 pink lines stared back at her. The room spun. Her throat closed. She pressed a hand to her stomach, disbelief giving way to tears. After years of failed fertility treatments and endless disappointment, now, after everything ended, life had decided to begin. She thought of calling Julian. For a full minute, she even picked up the phone. But then she remembered the look in his eyes that last morning, the cold distance, the polite detachment of a man already moving forward. And she couldn't. That night, she packed again, not to flee heartbreak this time, but to build safety. She found a small cottage in Maple Creek, a quiet suburb outside Denver, where the air smelled of pine and distant rain. The rent was modest, the walls old, but the windows looked out over a small field where wildflowers grew in uneven rows. It felt like the kind of place where a person could start over. A week after moving in, she met Sarah, her neighbor, a kind, middle-aged woman with curly gray hair and round glasses that always seemed to slip down her nose. Sarah brought soup and stories, the kind of company that made silence less heavy. When Olivia told her she was expecting, Sarah smiled and said softly, "You'll need a guardian, dear. Out here, the nights get long." 2 days later, Sarah returned with a wet, shivering German shepherd she had found by the roadside. The dog was about 3 years old, large but lean, with golden brown fur and deep, intelligent eyes that followed every movement. "He's been through something," Sarah said, handing her the leash. "But I think he just needs someone to believe in him again." Olivia knelt, meeting the dog's gaze. "You and me both," she whispered. She named him Rex. From that night forward, Rex never left her side. He followed her through the narrow hallways, lay near her bed as she slept, and when the winter winds howled across Maple Creek, his quiet breathing was the only sound that made her feel safe. Months passed. The pregnancy was not easy. There were nights when she woke gasping, terrified by the thought of raising a child alone. But Rex would place his head on her lap, steady and warm, as if promising she wasn't. When the time came, the delivery was long and painful, but when the nurse whispered, "It's twins," Olivia wept in disbelief. A boy and a girl, both perfect, both miracles. She named them Liam and Emma. Liam was the first to cry, strong, fierce, like he wanted the world to hear him. He had Julian's eyes, that piercing shade of green-blue that once made her weak. Emma arrived moments later, quiet, almost smiling, with her mother's dark lashes and tiny dimples. Holding them, Olivia felt a peace she hadn't known in years. Whatever storms lay behind her no longer mattered. She wasn't alone anymore. She had 2 tiny reasons to keep moving forward. By the time spring came to Maple Creek, Olivia had learned to live a new rhythm. Morning feedings, late-night lullabies, and Rex watching guard outside their window. She no longer kept track of the days. She didn't read business headlines anymore, didn't check Denver's news where Julian's name sometimes appeared. Her world had shrunk to something small, beautiful, and complete. A quiet home, a loyal dog, and two sleeping children breathing softly beside her. The chapter of her old life had ended in rain, but in this one, in the scent of milk and warm fur, in the faint laughter of babies, she finally felt the first fragile light of peace. 6 years had passed since that rain-soaked night in Denver. The storms had long moved on, but their echoes lingered in the quiet streets of Maple Creek. The town, tucked beneath the foothills west of Denver, wore early spring like a hesitant smile. Sunlight spilled over sloping roofs and bare branches, and the cold wind carried the faint scent of thawing earth. In a small blue house at the edge of town, life began each day with the laughter of two children and the deep, steady bark of a German shepherd. Olivia Carter had changed. The years had carved gentleness and quiet strength into her features. Her hair, still chestnut brown, now brushed her shoulders in waves that caught the morning light. Her hands bore the faint calluses of a woman who worked for everything she had. Her life was simpler now. No glass towers, no late-night arguments over dinner gone cold. Just the rhythm of school mornings, design deadlines, and bedtime stories. She worked as a freelance graphic designer, her small home office tucked near the kitchen, often scattered with sketches and half-finished coffee cups. Across the living room, Liam sat cross-legged on the floor, completely absorbed in the robot kit spread before him. At 6, he already had the focused expression of someone twice his age. His eyes, the same sea glass green as Julian's, held that spark of quiet intensity, a mix of curiosity and precision. His hair was light brown, his skin fair, his small brow furrowed whenever he was lost in thought. He loved things that moved, that could be built and rebuilt, as if understanding how pieces fit together might one day explain the world. His twin sister Emma was the opposite, all warmth and imagination. She sat near the window, her small fingers smudged with watercolor paint. At 6, she had inherited Olivia's softer features, the dark brown eyes, the dimpled smile, and the tendency to hum while she worked. She spoke to her drawings as if they could hear her, narrating whole worlds in whispers. "Mom," she called out, "if I paint the sky pink, do you think the birds will get confused?" Olivia laughed softly. "Only the silly ones, sweetheart." Near the doorway, Rex, now older but still strong, stretched and yawned, his fur glinting golden in the morning light. His muzzle had begun to gray around the edges, and one ear had a small notch from an old scrape, but his eyes were still alert and intelligent. At 9 years old, he had grown into the calm, loyal guardian of the family, patient with the twins, but fiercely protective. Every morning, he escorted them to the school bus stop, sitting upright like a soldier until the bus disappeared around the corner. The children in the neighborhood adored him, calling him the Maple Creek Sheriff. Sarah, Olivia's neighbor and the one who had introduced Rex into their lives, still lived 2 houses down. Age had softened her further. Her curly gray hair was now white, and her step slower, but she remained the heart of the small community. She often dropped by with pies or gossip about the new family that had moved into the yellow house on the next block, a young single father named Mark Reynolds, who worked as a carpenter. Mark was in his late 30s, tall with sun-browned skin, a short beard, and kind blue eyes that always seemed a little tired. His wife had passed away years ago in an accident, leaving him to raise his 7-year-old son, Caleb, alone. Caleb was shy and quiet, but he quickly bonded with Liam over their shared fascination with robots. Life in Maple Creek was ordinary in the best way. School projects, scraped knees, and warm dinners. Olivia had built a world that felt steady and safe. She didn't speak of Julian Pierce, not to her children, not even to Sarah. His name was a closed door she never opened. To her, he belonged to another life, a life made of ambition and loneliness. But miles away, in the high towers of downtown Denver, Julian Pierce still lived inside that world. His face occasionally appeared on magazine covers beside headlines like, "Pierce Development Expands to the West Coast." He had become what he always wanted, a man who built skylines. His office overlooked the city, a glass kingdom where everything gleamed but nothing felt alive. Julian's appearance had changed too. His once sunlit hair now carried faint streaks of gray, and the faint lines around his eyes hinted at years spent in quiet regret. The confidence he wore like armor in his youth had turned into restraint. To his employees, he was brilliant but distant, precise, demanding, fair, but never warm. His assistant, David Miller, was one of the few who saw past the surface. David, in his early 40s, was a sturdy man with a graying beard and a sense of humor that had survived a difficult life. Once a single father himself before his son left for college, David had become something like Julian's conscience. "You keep staring at that skyline like it's going to talk back," he'd joke when Julian grew too quiet. Julian would just smile faintly and return to work. Yet that morning, fate nudged the two worlds closer. Julian was headed to a new property site near the edge of Denver, reviewing blueprints in the back seat of his black SUV. His driver, an older man named Tom Harris, short-tempered but meticulous, missed a turn, cursing softly under his breath. "Sorry, Mr. Pierce. The GPS rerouted me through Maple Creek," he said. Julian barely looked up. "It's fine. Keep going." The car slowed near a school intersection. Children were pouring out of the gates, bright backpacks, laughter, the clatter of sneakers. Julian's gaze drifted absently to the sidewalk. For a fleeting second, he froze. There, standing near the crossing sign, was Olivia. Her hair glowed auburn in the sunlight, caught in the breeze. She looked different, stronger, freer, more radiant than he remembered. She was laughing as two children tugged at her hands, a boy and a girl, twins maybe, around 6. A large German shepherd stood beside them, tail wagging protectively. Julian's heart stuttered. For an irrational instant, he imagined stepping out, calling her name. But then, as his gaze shifted, he noticed a man's truck parked in the driveway of the blue house she was walking toward. A man's flannel jacket hung over the porch railing. The image twisted something deep inside him. He thought, "She moved on. She's happy. She built a life without me." "Everything all right, sir?" Tom asked. Julian's voice came quietly. "Yes. Keep driving." From the rearview mirror, David glanced at him, sensing the shift in his expression. "You okay, boss?" he asked. Julian stared out the window at the fading sight of the woman and the two children disappearing down the street. "Just fine," he murmured, but his jaw tightened. As the SUV pulled away, the city skyline rose again in the distance, tall, perfect, and empty. Julian Pierce looked at it and realized, perhaps for the first time, that the empire he built could never fill the space that love had once occupied. That night, while Maple Creek slept under a thin blanket of frost, Olivia sat by the twins' beds, brushing a strand of hair from Emma's cheek. Rex lay curled at her feet, his head resting near Liam's robot kit. Outside, the moonlight fell gently on the blue house, a house full of warmth, laughter, and the ghosts of choices made long ago. And somewhere in Denver, a man who had everything couldn't stop thinking about the woman who had taken his heart when she walked away. The day after that accidental encounter in Maple Creek, Julian Pierce couldn't focus. The city's skyline stretched endlessly outside his office window, but it felt hollow, like glass without reflection. Papers lay unread across his mahogany desk. His coffee had gone cold hours ago, and even the noise of the city below seemed distant. His mind was fixed on what he had seen, the woman he had once loved, and the two children who looked like pieces of a life he had lost. David Miller, his longtime assistant, noticed immediately. David was a man in his early 40s, with silver creeping through his dark beard and eyes that carried both humor and empathy. He had seen Julian on his best days and his worst, and he could read his boss like a book. When he entered the office that morning, carrying a folder of property contracts, he paused. "You've been staring at that window for 30 minutes, boss," he said gently. "Thinking about the past doesn't make it come back." Julian turned, the tension visible in his jaw. "What if the past never really left?" he murmured. David frowned, setting the folder down. "You mean that woman from yesterday? The one at the school?" Julian's gaze sharpened. "You noticed her too." David nodded slowly, a flicker of recognition dawning. "I couldn't help it. But what caught my eye wasn't her. It was the boy. Those green eyes, that walk. Julian, that kid looked like a smaller version of you." The words struck like thunder in Julian's chest. He felt the room tilt, his pulse quickening. "You're sure?" "As sure as I've ever been," David said quietly. "That boy could be your mirror, down to the shape of his nose. I'm not saying it's proof, but—" Julian didn't answer. His mind spun through years, dates, timelines, fragments of memory, the divorce papers, the day Olivia walked away. 8 months. The number repeated like an echo. His hand trembled slightly as he opened his laptop and searched for public birth records. It took minutes to find what he feared and hoped the most. Liam Carter, Emma Carter. Born 8 months after the Pierce divorce was finalized. Julian leaned back in his chair, air leaving his lungs in a slow, painful rush. The realization hit him in waves. Grief, guilt, fury, disbelief. He had 2 children. 2 children he had never known existed. 5 years of birthdays, laughter, and sleepless nights. Gone. He thought of the woman he had once shared everything with, holding that secret, raising those children alone. David watched in silence, his expression softening. "Julian," he said carefully, "you have to think this through. If you go storming in there—" "I'm not storming in," Julian interrupted, voice low but tight. "I'm going to see her. I just need to know why." By late afternoon, dark clouds gathered over Denver, the kind that threatened rain but held it hostage in gray silence. Julian drove himself, this time his black SUV humming down the long stretch of highway toward Maple Creek. He hadn't driven through these back roads in years, not since before everything had fallen apart. The mountains stood like silent witnesses in the distance. When he reached the small blue house, he parked a few houses down, watching. The yard looked the same as he remembered Olivia, simple, neat, alive. A wooden swing hung from a tree branch. 2 small bicycles leaned against the fence, and lying near the porch steps, eyes half-lidded but alert, was a large German shepherd. Rex. The dog was older now, heavier around the shoulders, but there was no mistaking the alert posture and keen eyes. When Julian stepped out of the car and closed the door softly, Rex's head rose. A low, warning growl rumbled from his throat, a sound of recognition and distrust. Julian froze, his voice quiet. "Easy, boy. I'm not here to hurt anyone." He had always admired German shepherds for their loyalty, and this one, clearly, had pledged his to Olivia and her children. Rex stood, blocking the path to the porch. The growl didn't deepen, but his gaze stayed fixed on Julian, waiting for a move. Before Julian could speak again, the front door opened. Olivia stepped out, wearing a gray sweater and jeans, her hair tied back. She looked surprised for a second, then her face hardened into stillness. The wind lifted the hem of her sweater as she crossed her arms. Julian. His name sounded strange on her lips, half memory, half defense. He swallowed. "Olivia, we need to talk." Her eyes flicked toward the children's bicycles, then to the car behind him. "Not here. I'm not leaving until you tell me the truth." The standoff lasted several seconds, broken only by the wind rustling the trees. Then she sighed, opening the screen door wider. "Fine. 10 minutes." Inside, the air smelled of coffee and paint. Children's drawings covered the refrigerator. The sound of laughter drifted faintly from upstairs, Liam and Emma playing. Olivia motioned for Julian to sit at the kitchen table, but he stayed standing. "I know about them," he said finally. "The twins." Her expression didn't change, but her fingers tightened around the mug she held. "I figured you would. Eventually." 8 months after the divorce, Julian continued. "You found out the day you signed those papers, didn't you?" Her silence was answer enough. "Why didn't you tell me, Olivia?" His voice cracked slightly, more pain than anger. "You let me live my life thinking, God, I didn't even know I was a father." She set the mug down, her movements deliberate, controlled. "Because you weren't there, Julian. Not really. You were already gone long before I left. You loved your company more than you loved us. I was scared. Scared that my children would grow up fighting for a place in your world. Just like I did." Julian shook his head. "That's not fair." "No, it's not," she cut in sharply. "But it's the truth." Rex padded to her side, sitting near her feet, his eyes flicking toward Julian. For a long time, neither spoke. The wind picked up again, brushing against the windows. Finally, Julian's voice softened. "Let me meet them. Please." Olivia hesitated. Her instinct screamed to say no, but she saw something in his face. Not the man who had left her behind, but the man who once whispered plans under Denver's skyline. The one who used to trace her hand in the dark. She nodded slowly. "You'll meet them, but on my terms. Public place. Tomorrow after school. I'll tell them you're a family friend, and Rex comes with us." Julian almost smiled through the ache. "Fair enough." As he left the small blue house, Rex followed him to the gate, sitting like a sentry. Julian looked down at the dog and said softly, "Keep them safe. You've done a better job than I ever did." Rex didn't move, but his tail flicked once, acknowledging both warning and forgiveness. That night, Julian drove back through the city under a sky heavy with unfallen rain. For the first time in years, he felt something close to purpose. Fragile, painful, but alive. Tomorrow, he would meet his children. And everything he thought he knew about his life would change. The following weeks unfolded like cautious sunlight after a storm. Slow, uncertain, but warm. Julian kept his promise. He met the twins at the park near Maple Creek Elementary under the pretense of being an old family friend. Olivia watched from a bench, Rex lying loyally beside her, his head resting on his paws, but his sharp eyes never straying far from the children. Liam was the first to approach Julian with the bold curiosity that only 6-year-old boys possessed. He wore a red t-shirt with a tiny rip on the sleeve and held a small model robot missing an arm. "Can you fix it?" he asked, extending it toward the tall stranger. Julian knelt, his tailored jacket brushing the grass, and smiled softly. "I can try," he said, taking a tiny screwdriver from his pocket, a habit from his engineering-minded youth before he ever dreamed of skyscrapers. Emma watched from behind her brother, half hiding behind her hair, her watercolor-stained fingers clutching the hem of her dress. It took Julian 5 minutes to reattach the arm. When the toy whirred to life again, Liam's eyes lit up. "You're good at this!" the boy exclaimed. Emma tilted her head. "Mom said you're an engineer." Olivia froze at the bench but kept silent. Julian smiled gently, hiding the ache in his chest. Something like that. That afternoon marked the first of many small beginnings. Julian joined them every weekend, finding new ways to fit into the rhythms of their lives. Saturdays became adventures, kite flying at the park, building cardboard forts in the backyard, visits to the Denver Zoo. The twins adored the giraffes. Emma loved sketching their long necks and gentle eyes, while Liam marveled at the mechanical gate systems that opened and closed with clockwork precision. Olivia often trailed behind, quiet but observant, her heart torn between joy and fear. Julian's transformation surprised her. Gone was the impatient man who once checked his phone between dinner conversations. Now, he was the first to crouch down and tie Emma's shoelaces or carry Liam on his shoulders when he grew tired. Rex, once wary, began to tolerate him. On the third weekend, when Julian knelt to feed Rex a treat, the dog sniffed, considered, and finally wagged his tail, a small but monumental truce. Yet not everything was seamless. Olivia insisted on boundaries. She made it clear that Julian's role would grow only as the children adjusted. Still, she couldn't ignore how naturally he fit into their world. When Emma's watercolor set ran dry, Julian showed up the next day with a professional kit wrapped in blue ribbon. When Liam's kite tore, Julian stayed late fixing it, teaching him how to reinforce the frame. Then, one Sunday afternoon, Denver's spring weather turned treacherous. The sky darkened over City Park as the first drops of rain fell. Liam was chasing Rex near the pond, while Emma collected small white flowers for a painting. Within minutes, rain poured, down in heavy sheets, thunder growling in the distance. Olivia shouted for the twins to come back, but her voice was swallowed by the storm. Julian ran toward them, slipping on the wet grass. "Liam! Emma!" he called. Rex barked sharply, corralling the children toward a large oak tree. When Julian reached them, both kids were huddled together beneath the branches, eyes wide with fear. Without thinking, he took off his coat, wrapping it around their small shoulders. "It's okay," he said, voice steady despite the downpour. "I've got you." Olivia arrived moments later, soaked and shaking. She froze at the sight. The twins pressed against Julian's chest, Rex sitting protectively beside them, his fur slick with rain. For a moment, time blurred. The image was raw, unguarded, and heartbreakingly whole. It was the family they once might have been, and the one they were quietly becoming again. After that day, something shifted. Olivia began to lower her guard. She agreed to short family therapy sessions at the suggestion of Dr. Marlene Hayes, a gentle woman in her 50s, with kind hazel eyes and a calm voice that carried experience. Marlene had been a therapist for nearly 2 decades, her silver-streaked brown hair often tied into a neat bun. She had a way of asking simple questions that led to deep answers. Children sense tension, she explained during the first session. But they also sense when adults are brave enough to heal. The sessions were awkward at first. Julian struggled to express guilt without defensiveness. Olivia wrestled with anger that still flared in her chest. Liam fidgeted constantly, while Emma sat quietly drawing pictures of 4 stick figures, 3 standing together, 1 slightly apart. Weeks passed. Through patient conversation and hesitant honesty, walls began to crumble. One afternoon, after a particularly emotional session, Julian said softly, "I let the world outside our home become more important than the one inside it." Olivia met his eyes, "And I stopped believing you could change." Later that evening, Julian invited Olivia and the twins to a charity gala hosted by his company. It was formal, glittering, and far removed from the quiet life she had built. But he wanted them to see the part of his world he used to choose over them, and to show them he never would again. The event took place in a glass-walled ballroom downtown, light spilling across marble floors. Olivia wore a simple navy dress that hugged her figure elegantly. Her hair, loose for once, shimmered under the chandeliers. Emma wore a pink satin dress, and Liam a small suit, both slightly too big. Rex stayed home with Sarah, who had become his unofficial caretaker whenever Olivia was away. As guests mingled and cameras flashed, Julian never left Olivia's side. When asked by a business associate, "Is this your family?" he answered without hesitation, "Yes, this is Olivia and our children." The words sent a ripple of warmth and disbelief through her. For years, she had been invisible in his world of ambition. Now he was claiming her openly, proudly. During his speech, Julian stood before the crowd, voice steady but thick with emotion. "Success means nothing if you lose sight of what truly matters. Tonight, I'm grateful for a second chance to get it right." Olivia's eyes blurred with tears. For the first time, she believed him. When the gala ended, they returned to Maple Creek in silence, the twins asleep in the back seat. Olivia turned to Julian as the car idled in her driveway. "You've changed," she whispered. He met her gaze, tired but peaceful. "No, I'm just finally becoming who I should have been all along." As he left, Rex greeted him at the gate with a soft, approving bark. The storm from weeks ago had left puddles still glinting in the moonlight, but above them, the sky was clear. Inside the blue house, Olivia stood by the window long after Julian's car disappeared. Somewhere deep inside, she knew forgiveness had already begun, not just for him, but for herself. Autumn settled over the outskirts of Denver like a soft, golden blanket. Maple Creek's trees blazed with shades of amber and crimson, their leaves drifting down the narrow streets where laughter and barbecue smoke mingled in the cool air. In the backyard of the Blue House, a table had been set with balloons, ribbons, and a homemade chocolate cake, slightly uneven, lovingly imperfect. It was the twins' 6th birthday, and the world, for once, felt steady. Olivia Carter moved briskly between the kitchen and the yard, adjusting plates and pouring lemonade. Her hair, tied loosely at the nape of her neck, shimmered chestnut under the fading sunlight. She had a calmness now that hadn't existed years ago, a quiet kind of happiness born from exhaustion and forgiveness. The faint laugh lines near her eyes deepened as she watched her children chase after Rex, whose thick golden fur caught bits of autumn leaves. Rex, now nearing 10, had slowed slightly with age. His movements were steadier, his muzzle sprinkled with white, but his loyalty burned just as strong. He wore a small bow collar today, one Olivia had made from red ribbon, because even he was part of the celebration. His ears twitched at the sound of squealing children as he bounded after a soccer ball, tail wagging in slow, proud arcs. Liam had grown tall for his age, all elbows and curiosity. His green-blue eyes, his father's eyes, gleamed as he proudly displayed his latest invention. A homemade robot built from old circuit boards and a cereal box. "It moves," he announced, pressing a button that sent it shuffling across the porch before it toppled into Rex's water bowl. Everyone laughed, even Rex, who wagged approvingly. Emma, her curls tucked behind her ears, sat by the picnic table drawing something intently. Her small hands were stained with paint, her tongue peeking from the corner of her mouth in concentration. She had her mother's focus and her father's quiet intensity, and when she finished, she held up a picture. 4 figures holding hands and a 5th, Rex, standing proudly beside them. "It's us," she said simply. Olivia smiled, feeling a warmth that tightened her chest. When Julian arrived, the children shouted his name in unison, running to greet him. He wore jeans and a light flannel shirt, his sleeves rolled to the forearms, the faintest trace of stubble along his jaw. The once polished executive had been softened by time and fatherhood. There was a gentleness in his movements now, a patience that hadn't existed before. He carried 2 gifts, a small box for Liam and a larger, colorfully wrapped one for Emma. "For my favorite artists," he said, "both of you." As evening fell, candles were lit on the cake. "Make a wish," Olivia whispered, her arms around them. Liam and Emma glanced at each other, exchanging silent agreement. Then, in one voice, they said, "We want to live together. All of us." The words hit Olivia and Julian like a soft blow. She felt Julian's eyes on her, warm and searching, but she looked down quickly, helping the children blow out the candles before the tears reached her own. After the guests, Sarah, kind as ever with her tray of homemade cookies, and the Reynolds family from next door, had gone home. The twilight deepened. The sky blushed purple above the quiet street. Olivia stood by the porch railing, arms crossed loosely, watching the children chase fireflies while Rex sat like a guardian statue nearby. Julian stepped beside her, the faint chill in the air carrying the scent of pine and smoke. "They're right, you know," he said softly. "We should all be together." She smiled faintly, but didn't meet his gaze. "Life isn't a children's wish, Julian. It's hard work. It's compromise." "I know," he said, his voice steady, "and I'm ready for both." When she turned, she found him kneeling, not with a ring box, but with Rex beside him. Around the dog's neck hung the red bow again, and tied to it was a small velvet pouch. Rex tilted his head as Julian untied the ribbon, pulling out a simple gold ring. "It's not about starting over," Julian said. "It's about continuing what we never finished. I'm asking you to let me come home. To you. To them." Olivia's breath caught. The scene was absurdly tender. Rex sitting proudly, the children watching wide-eyed from the porch steps, the orange glow of dusk reflecting in Julian's eyes. "Julian," she began, but he raised a hand gently. "Before you answer, I need to promise something. Family comes first. Always. I'll leave work at the door. No late calls, no missed dinners. Friday nights, family dinners, Sundays, our green weekends. Me, you, the twins, and Rex. Outside, no phones, no distractions." Olivia's eyes shimmered. And when the company demands you fly across the country, then they can wait. I've spent years building towers for strangers. I want to build a home now, with you. For a long moment, only the sound of wind moved between them. Then she smiled through the tears. You're stubborn, you know that? Only when it matters. She nodded, whispering, then yes. Yes, Julian. The twins cheered, Rex barked, and for a fleeting second, the world felt perfectly right. Weeks later, they moved into their new home, a 2-story house in the Denver suburbs with wide windows, soft golden light, and a sprawling backyard perfect for Rex and the children. The garden bloomed with wild daisies, and Julian built a small wooden workshop in one corner of the yard, where he could work on designs without locking himself away. Olivia turned the upstairs room into a studio, her easels lined with canvases filled with color and family. Their days fell into a rhythm of laughter and small rituals. Dinner at 6 sharp, evening walks with Rex trotting ahead, weekend picnics at the foothills, where Liam collected stones and Emma painted the view. And when rain came, they sat together by the window, Julian with coffee, Olivia sketching, Rex sleeping between their feet while the twins built castles out of cardboard. One evening, as autumn leaves swirled outside, the family gathered around the dining table. Liam showed off his newest robot, its arms waving clumsily. Emma proudly held up a new painting titled Family of 4 and Rex. Olivia laughed, squeezing Julian's hand beneath the table. He looked at her and whispered, "This is what I was chasing all along." She squeezed back. You just had to stop running to see it. Outside, the last light of dusk faded into night, the windows glowing with warmth. In the yard, Rex lifted his head briefly, as if ensuring all was well, then settled back down. Inside the house, love and laughter mingled with the scent of cinnamon and rain. A quiet promise kept, at last. Sometimes, God doesn't send us miracles in thunder or lightning. Sometimes, His miracles arrive quietly, in the laughter of a child, in the forgiveness between two hearts, in the loyal bark of a dog who never leaves your side. What Julian and Olivia found wasn't perfection. It was grace. The kind of grace that only comes when broken people choose to love again, when they decide to rebuild instead of run away. Every sunrise is another chance for us to begin again, to say I'm sorry, to say I forgive you, to choose the people who truly matter. Miracles don't always look like what we pray for. Sometimes they look like what we learn to protect day after day. So if you've ever lost faith, remember, God works in small, ordinary moments, in homes filled with laughter, in hearts learning to heal. He turns endings into beginnings and pain into purpose. May God bless you and your family. May He grant you peace, second chances, and the courage to love again, just like Olivia, Julian, Liam, Emma, and Rex did. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment about your favorite part or the moment that moved you the most. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more life-changing, faith-filled stories. Because somewhere out there, someone is still waiting for their miracle. And maybe your story will be the sign they need. God bless you always.